Yo, yo, yo. Hey guys, welcome back to another awesome edition of the Best Practices Show podcast. Do you have challenges boosting productivity and profitability in hygiene? Well, many dental offices do. And our job here is to bring you great information to help you create a better practice and a better life. Well, I have two rock stars, Miranda Beeson and Heather Crockett. They did a webinar recently called Hygiene Department Power, Boosting Productivity and Profits Through Data. It was so good, I thought I would share the audio version of the webinar. So here it is. I hope you guys enjoy this, and we'll see you soon.
Excited to have all of you here, and hygiene people are our people. Heather and I are both hygienists. Heather Crockett is a coach, lead practice coach here with ACT, and a hygienist, and I'm a hygienist as well of it's 21 years now, and also working as a lead practice coach and director of education with ACT. So we're excited to be here to talk hygiene with you guys today. As we jump into it, I always like to give Kirk an opportunity to share a little bit of his message around ACT and the BPA. So Kirk, take it away.
Awesome. I was hoping you would ask or give me the opportunity. So we're so excited you guys are here. And as you if you're here for the first time, I always want to say thank you for being here and welcome. And if you're here returning, welcome back. Our goal with these webinars is to bring you really, really great information so that you can use it, you can share it with your teams. And in that process, we're going to share with you other things that we're doing. And one of the coolest things that we do among many is we have our study club. And we started this a long time ago. It was officially the Inner Circle. Then it morphed into the To the Top Study Club. And the goal was to bring people together. And now it's grown into really two very nice groups of 40 plus. We hold it once a quarter in Milwaukee at our state-of-the-art training center. And our goal is to have a third group. So we love it so much. It's an opportunity to get the best information. All the content is very different every time. And we just invite you to come. We love it so much. We believe in it so much that you can come for free and you can hang out. And if you don't like it, you don't have to stay. You can just take the information and chalk it up as a good day. It's from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. on certain Fridays, and you now have a golden ticket. You can redeem the golden ticket through Gina, Gina, at actdental.com, and she will make you feel really welcome. So please join us.
And we enjoy being a part of that community so much. We're spreading that even further into our Best Practices Association. Do you want to talk a little bit about how to climb to the top with ACT, Kirk?
Yes. So people always say, well, what do you guys do? We only do three things primarily. So we have our BPA, which is you can do it on your own. It started way prior to COVID. We had ACT Dental U, and we collected all of these incredible resources. We were creating our own resources, and now they're just on a platform where you can consume them 24/7. We're constantly adding to it and improving it. So if you're looking to create a better practice and better life, all the resources are back there where you can do it on your own. If your team meetings are terrible, don't do that. Just come back and light one of these things up and add some energy to it. So that's the first thing that we do. The second thing we do is you can do it in a group. And that's part of the To the Top Study Club that we already mentioned. So if you just want to be around a group that's pushing you, I always tell my kids, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. And so I don't think it's any different for us as adults. And so that's the second thing we do. And then the third thing we do is pro coaching. So if you've tried everything, or if you're a great practice who's just looking to get greater or even better, that's where we come in, where we'll assign one of our amazing lead coaches to your practice. And I just want you to enjoy going to work. And sometimes it's just hard that you're a dentist. You don't have the entrepreneurial time. So don't try to figure it all out. This is all we do with practices all over the country. So you can join us inside the BPA. Here's where you can find that link. We also have a mobile app where you can take it on the go with you 24/7. So Love it.
And I also did add a couple of QR codes just in case anybody wants easy access. If you want to check out the BPA and see what it's all about, there's a QR code there. And also we have a podcast. If you're not already listening to the podcast, there's so much great content on the podcast from people within ACT and people outside in the dental community. So both of those codes there for you if you're interested in learning anything more or just hearing a little bit more about what we have to talk about and how we help practices have a better practice and a better life. We'd love for you to join us in any way that works for you.
Love it. Love it. Love
All
it.
right, we're going to dive in.
Let's do it. Let's go.
Ready.
Let's do it. Hygiene department power. Let's go. So why are we even talking about this today? So I mentioned just a minute ago that dental hygiene is a business within a business. And I think as a hygienist myself early on, I didn't recognize that so much. And where I really had a turn in my career and started to have a shift in what felt really good and fulfilling for me was when I realized that I had some power over this business that fell within the business of my dental practice. So pardon me, we're going to talk a little bit today about how looking at the data of our hygiene business can help for us to impact patients positively, our own lives positively, and then ultimately the practice in a positive way. So when we look at how does this benefit the patient, we often talk about data as hygienists and we get a little icky feeling where it's not our favorite thing to talk about. We'd much rather talk about the patient that we got to hug today, or the patient that we cried with yesterday, or that really awesome Perio case that we finished. And let me show you the before and after x-rays. But all of those things that we're doing actually result in data. They result in metrics. They result in patient satisfaction. And so when we're looking at the data, we can tell that the more we focus on that and improving those numbers and knowing what they are in our business within the business, we're going to enhance the patient experience. So treatment outcomes and patient access to care and patient satisfaction is going to improve. We'll be meeting patients' needs at a higher level. As that data grows, so does the patient's need base. And so we're going to be able to be helping more people. Their experience will result more positively. If we can see data that's not trending well and then take action to make things better, the result is the next time our patient comes in, it's going to be a better experience. And don't we always want to be creating a better experience for our patients? When we also talk about minimizing wait times. So data can tell us a lot about the efficiency or inefficiencies within the practice. And there's not much that our patients like, much less than sitting in the reception area, waiting for an appointment that they probably, to be honest, don't want to be at to begin with, because they tell us all the time, right, that they don't want to be there. So if we make them wait for it, that's even worse. So when we look at the data and we can really look at where our efficiencies and inefficiencies lie, we can look at our schedule and where we can maybe optimize things within our schedule. It's going to help minimize those wait times and improve that experience for our patients, appointment after appointment. And then also we're elevating their oral health. I like to help hygienists think about the mindset around data of these numbers represent the health of your patient pool. And I always considered my patients my friends. I loved spending time with them. I wanted nothing but the best for them. I knew their children and their aunts and their uncles and their grandparents that came to the practice. And so when I saw numbers going up or improving when I was tracking that data, I knew that I was helping to elevate oral health for my patients. And so to me, as a hygienist, that was the biggest benefit of knowing my numbers and knowing the data. Heather, did you track data when you were practicing hygiene?
To a degree, not at the level that we should have. I know a lot more now than when I was in clinical dental hygiene. But I love that you started with this, Miranda, because as a hygienist, that's the reason why I showed up for work is for my patients. I wanted to be there for them. I wanted to help them to obtain that oral health that you're speaking of. Helping to take it to the next level and elevating it is exactly what that data will help us to achieve.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it also helps us, the dental hygienist. So what's in it for me? I always say whenever we're trying something new with the team as coaches, Heather, you can probably relate. We always have to think about how are we going to make sure the team knows that like there's something they're going to be getting out of this new thing as well. So if you're new to tracking data, or you're just going to start shifting how you're tracking data after you have today's webinar, just know that you do receive a benefit from tracking data as the dental hygienist. And I think one of those benefits is a balanced workload. When we know where our strengths and limitations are, not just ours like personally, but our practice, our department, the systems that we're working within, we're able to then create a more structured, balanced, efficient day. And so we don't feel so burnt out. We're not running as ragged because we can start to pinpoint the areas that aren't working as well and then create a solution for those issues or problems that are impacting our day in a negative way. We end up with a lot of bottlenecks throughout the day between the front office and the back office. What if we could improve the seamless transition through systems and being able to know where we need to starts by looking at the numbers. So I do think that the data helps us to develop a more balanced workload over time. And I think one of the biggest things for the hygienist is professional development. It's so important for you to focus on your own self. And this is a career. This is a career that you're going to have forever. If you're new to hygiene, here I am 21 years later, right? I'm still a hygienist. I'm just doing it at a different capacity. But you can take what you learn through data and turn that into more and more, expand upon that as you grow throughout your profession. You're going to be empowered when you know data, empowered to make decisions. Your doctor will start to view you as a more autonomous colleague because you understand how what you're doing every day impacts the business. If you make a recommendation and you can base that on something that's not feelings and true data, and you can show that to the dental practice owner that you work for and say, I have some ideas. I see this number and I have some ideas. You're going to be empowered in your career and in your profession. And in the end, that's going to make you feel a lot more fulfilled, right? Most of us do want to have something that we're striving towards. And I even say data can be as simple as Google reviews. We want to go from a 4.6 to a 4.9 rating. What's my role as a dental hygienist in making that change? We're going to talk about some different data points today than that. But when we talk about data, nearly everything can be turned into data. Heather, you're really good at helping teams turn pretty much anything.
Anything can become data. If you have something you're like, ooh, I don't know, and it's subjective and you want to make it objective with data, you just let me know. I'd be happy to help you turn it into a data point.
I love that. The passion and enthusiasm for data, right? That we have.
Yes.
So obviously data also benefits the practice. And ultimately, I put this as the last benefit point because I really want to emphasize the importance of that data can truly benefit our patients and it can truly benefit us as dental hygienists. And then, yes, it also does benefit the practice. And in turn, anything that benefits the practice then also comes back around to benefit you, who's a part of that team. So the thing around the practice is the data is going to help us to have more strategic decision making. I mentioned earlier feelings, and a lot of teams that we work with when we first start working with them, if they're not tracking data, most of the decision making that they're putting into play in the practice is stemming from feelings or fear. And as soon as we can take those feelings and fear and put numbers behind them, and like you just said, like now we don't have this subjective piece to it. It's a data point. It's a fact. And then we can just move from there. It's not personal. Let's figure out how to make things better. So we can make really strategic decisions and move in the right direction with our practice when we have strong data. And in the end, that's going to result in enhanced profitability. And this is where I mentioned the practice, of course, wants to be profitable, but profitability of the practice is what also allows for all of us to be employed by the practice. So isn't it a win-win for everyone when the practice is more profitable? And anytime we can identify efficiency gaps, areas in the practice where, we have very limited time in the day. Kirk talks about time is the new rich. We actually have t-shirts that say it. So time is the new rich, and we only have but 8 hours or maybe 7.5 in our clinical day. And so anytime we can use data to help maximize those 8 hours to provide a higher level of elevated care for our patients and go home feeling like we still have something left to give to our kids and to our husband, and we're not wanting to just crawl into bed and pull the covers over our head, right? Which happens sometimes. I've been there. So that's what data, I believe, really helps us to do is work towards a better practice and overall a better life. Any other thoughts on why data is so important, Heather, before we jump into, or Kirk, before we jump into what data we're going to talk about today?
Heather, you go first.
Well, as a hygienist, I look at that word like profitability and just go, oh, okay. Well, sure. Again, it's that ick feeling with the numbers. I want to help mold everybody that's on this call, your mindset to say, if those numbers improve and the practice is more profitable from the hygiene department, what that tells me is I took care of my patients. at another level that I probably didn't even think was possible. So I want you to shift your mindset into this is proof that shows we take care of our patients at the highest level of our education.
Yeah.
Love it.
And I'm always blown away by people that take the initiative to learn more. And so this is my coaching, and we're coaches. That's what we do. I tell my kids the same thing, like, don't go to the world and ask the world for anything. Like, learn a lot, become valuable, gain extra perspective, not just what am I getting. And I'm not saying that specifically to hygienists, and I don't want anybody to hear that, but I really love the mindset of meeting anyone in dentistry who's like, I really want to learn how my role and what I can do to become more valuable, because there's nothing better as a business owner than when somebody goes, hey, listen, I get what's going on here, and I want to be a part of that solution. So I love all of it.
Awesome. And I love what you just mentioned too, before we jump on, around kind of just knowing the value that you bring. Like, it just, some days you go through it and you're like, does that, the same person that I just saw 3 months ago and 3 months before that still hasn't done the thing that I asked them to do, right? So you get a little defeated sometimes as a hygienist, and I'm going to speak as a hygienist for a minute. You see this in forums. I hear other hygienists talk about it, that you get a little burnout and you start to feel like, what am I even doing this for anymore? But when you can see through data the value that you're bringing to this practice, we love to do this exercise where we talk about the practice and we go around for each team member and we say, how many people are in your family that your, paycheck and your income from this practice helps support. And you get around to the end of the group and you're like, holy cow, this practice takes care of, 112 people cumulatively. And when I can stop and look at data and see that I am growing the value of this practice to help take care of not only our patients, but also the 112 people that my teammates and myself help support through the profitability of the practice, it's so much bigger than a number on a spreadsheet or another dollar in the practice's bank account. It's a bigger thing than that. So I love that you just mentioned like the value that you can provide. And I'm a big fan of exactly what you said, is like being your own advocate, not waiting for someone else to create that destiny for you, but for you to show up and seek out new opportunities to grow and develop. So data is just one place that we can start doing that. So we're going to do it today. Maybe we'll teach somebody something new.
Maybe. And speaking of showing up, those of you that are on that have joined the webinar today, like, you are showing and proving that you are invested in your career.
I love it.
For sure.
And don't forget that you can always pop in and share with us if you have experience with any of these data points, things that you've learned or grown through, or if you started tracking data and you felt something change in your role and in your fulfillment or in your practice, like, share it with us. We love stories at ACT. I don't know if you know that, but stories are our favorite thing.
Yeah. Or questions, comments, questions, anything. Just share it with us. Yeah. We love it.
Sweet. Well, we'll jump into a couple of basics. So when we look at data, there's a couple of different types of data, or KPIs, key performance indicators. There's lagging indicators and leading indicators. And as you can see here with the image, the leading indicators feed into our lagging indicators. So to give you an example to better understand what this means, is our lagging indicators tend to be something like production. At the end of the month, we run a report, we look and see, what did we produce last month? However, it's retrospective. So we're looking backwards in retrospect at what has already happened. We can't do anything to affect that production when it's already occurred. And now we're running a report at the beginning of March for what we did in February. So what we can do, however, is look at leading indicators on a daily or weekly basis that then would impact that lagging indicator. And we can look at what kind of impact we can have along the way to help fuel that. And so some ideas around leading indicators that might help us represent where our production will end up at the end of that month is looking at our production per day, looking at our production per visit, maybe production per hour. Now, with this example and everything that we're going to be talking about today, there's so many key performance indicators that we could share with you. And the list goes on and on and on. And we're just sampling a few. So when you see something like this, know that this is not the only thing that leads into our lagging indicator of production. And as we go through some of the hygiene specific numbers, same thing, there's plenty of other things. We're just going to highlight some of the top KPIs today. Anything else on leading and lagging?
You nailed it.
Yeah, and it's a huge change. If anybody's been in dentistry as long as I have, I mean, 30 years, it was always like money, 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 money. Now you're going to see once you make the pivot into leading indicators, it's all about things that are actionable that you can do today that have huge impacts. Because I've been there, like there are days where like I remember 20 years ago, like I don't know what we could do today because it's snowing outside. Like, but you can once you get into leading indicators, you can see pivot points every day that you can just improve and tweak that have an exponential impact on the outcome, which are the lagging indicators, which I love too. It also changes the narrative of every morning huddle, every conversation that this is always about money. So I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we're going to go through a few of these today. We're going to talk about lagging indicators in dental hygiene and then some leading indicators that play into that. And then we are going to do what you just mentioned, Kirk, which is talk about a couple of countermeasures, actionable things that you can do when some of these are off track. So we'll get to some of the countermeasures after we talk about what do some of these numbers even mean? What do they measure? So a few hygiene lagging indicators that we're going to talk about today. So again, there's many, but this is where we're going to focus today is hygiene production. And we have gross and net production. Some of you may be familiar with what that is. And there's a lot of people in the dental community who really don't understand the difference between gross and net. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to talk about hygiene capacity, meaning another word we use around that is utilization. So schedule utilization. How much of the time that we have available do we have patients being served in the chair? And then we're also going to be looking at Perio visit percentage. So first, we're going to help you to understand what those lagging indicators are. And then what are some of the leading indicators that will feed into those? What are they measuring? How do we access that information? And then what do we do if they get off track? So we're going to start with hygiene production. This is probably the most well-known key performance indicator in all of dentistry, production, right? And so hygiene production, which can be measured in gross and net, basically just tells us how much the hygiene department is producing out of the overall business. So hygiene production gross, that's going to be the dollar amount that's completed in services relative to your full office fee schedule by the hygienist or hygienist in a given time period. So you can run a production report for the entire practice, and then you can also run production reports by provider or department. And you can do that in your practice management software, but what you're going to see on a lot of our slides here today is within Dental Intel, which is an analytics platform that our coaching clients utilize when their software is compatible. And so this is just an image for you when we open up Dental Intel and we're looking at production and we're highlighting our hygienists, and we can see that in the upper right-hand corner, we have gross selected. And this particular practice, which is a slightly large practice, they have 4 practicing dentists. So they have 7 to 8 hygienists on any given basis. And we're looking at a week of production, and they're at $37,185 in gross production. So I'm going to have you kind of pin those numbers in your mind just a little bit if you can, because as we go through and look at like, what if it's off track, you'll see the difference in some of these practices who are off track in comparison to this office is doing great. They're at almost $40,000 a week in hygiene gross production. Now, I like to say that sometimes gross production, you can remember it because it is often a gross exaggeration of what you're actually able to collect. I will say, knowing the practice we're talking about, they are an out-of-network fee-for-service practice, so this is pretty relative for them. But in many, many practices, it's a gross representation because in reality, we can only collect on our net production. And just to bring it super low, I always tell people, I tell teams all the time, you just imagine this is what you can actually scoop up in a net and just cart it on home with you.
That's great. I haven't heard that before. No, Kirk raised his hand. Kirk is ready to.
No. I'm just so glad you pointed that out, because as we go further into the gaps, it's debunking a lot of the old methodology. Well, especially when it comes to hygiene compensation, how much should that be? And the more that you know, the more valuable you become. So if you're a hygienist and hey, we're writing off a third and I'm producing a lot, it creates an awesome opportunity for a conversation, So I just love that you said that. It's scoopable. I'm going to totally borrow that from you. Heather, what was your thought?
the gross, when it comes to gross, like that's your potential.
Right.
Yes.
So you have to look at that in a way like this is how much you could make as your net if, like you said, Kirk, you had a conversation around what is it that you are not collecting based off of agreements or contracts that you have with different insurance companies.
Exactly. Because the net is the dollar amount that's completed relative to your full office fee schedules by the hygienist or hygienist in a given time period. I don't have it written down there, but it's minus any adjustments that you're taking. So if you're contracted with insurance companies, then that means you're going to have to take an adjustment on some of those fees because the allowable amount per your contract is going to be lower than your office fee. Also, you might be having membership plan adjustments, and then often there's just elective adjustments in your practice. There's courtesies that are provided, cash courtesies, doctor applied courtesies, warranty courtesies. There's a lot of different things that you might be adjusting off of that gross number in your practice, and therefore your net can be considerably lower. I think the average, Kirk often talks about the average in the US is around, I think, 40% in terms of when you're PPO contracted. I have several teams that are in the upper 40% and working on reducing that number and reducing their contract participation because it's hard to give away half of what you do. And if you're a hygienist, and I was just talking with a team about this yesterday when I was in person with them, and we were talking about the fact like, okay, but this is the same schedule we've always worked. We've worked the same schedule for 15 years. I don't understand how we're not making more now than we were then. We've raised our fees. We've done that. Yes, you have raised your office fees, but you're contracted with so many plans that haven't, and expenses have gone up, and payroll has gone up, and lab costs have gone up. And so you're actually making less, air quotes for anyone who's listening to this and not watching, than you were 15 years ago because of that net versus gross. And so when you can understand the difference in that, as a hygienist, it's important because we're always looking at, how can I grow financially just as much so as professionally? And these are numbers that are really important for you to understand because you can look at it and go like, oh my gosh, I produce $2,500 a day for my practice and I'm making this. But what's your net, right? Because we have to run gross and net to see the difference and see where we're at. And so you're right, we're in a conundrum around some of that. And I'm not going to go down that path today of hygiene pay. But these are important numbers for us as hygienists to know because we do have those conversations with our employer. And the more knowledgeable we can be when we have those conversations, the better. In the same way that we encourage our doctors to be really knowledgeable around their numbers when they talk to their CPA.
Yeah.
Right? It's just good to know.
Yeah. And I was just going to add to that, Miranda, too, just another reason to be more valuable or another way to be valuable is that you're knee to knee with the patient, too. So if you really understand this, you can patients are going to be vulnerable with you and they're going to ask you questions. They might not ask anybody else in the office and go, is my insurance going to cover this? And you can't blink. And now because of your added knowledge of what you're learning today, you now become that much more valuable to the patient. And you also know this if you're a hygienist. There are so many moments where you just got to love somebody and let them know, look, your insurance isn't going to cover this. But I want you to keep these teeth and I want to help retain the shape of this beautiful face. So, and they need you. They need you to be able to communicate that way. So I love it. Yeah.
So we can't change that ourselves, right? That's a practice philosophy. So we'll leave our dentist to join us for our PPO roadmap conversations and we can talk about that. But in terms of our hygienists and what we can do to affect that lagging indicator of hygiene production, here's a few leading KPIs or key performance indicators that we can look at on a daily basis to see how are we feeding into our overall monthly or quarterly or annually production as a department or as an individual. So that's going to be looking at our hygiene production per day, hygiene production per hour, and per visit. So PPD, PPH, and PPV. So we'll take a look at what each of those means. Now, again, we're looking at a practice that I mentioned is in a really healthy place. So at $37,185 in gross per week, we look at that and break it down, and hygiene is at $7,437 per day. So this is in particular is in gross because I mentioned this practice doesn't really have a lot of write-offs. And so it's pretty replicable to what's actual for them. But this can be running gross or net. So you can look at what your gross production per day is and you can look at what your net production per day is after adjustments. And the way that Dental Intel has this broken down, and you can kind of see in the middle of the screen there, you can actually see per hygienist, how that then tallies up into our cumulative production per day. If you're a single hygiene practice, I've worked in one of those myself, just going to be your number, right? But it can be really nice in your department to look at each hygienist and see where everybody falls, and then learn from each other if somebody's doing really well versus somebody who may be struggling with production per day. Like, where are we at? Maybe our block scheduling is not aligned. And so we'll look at some of those countermeasures as we go along. So this is the dollar amount that's completed per day by the hygienist and or hygienists, plural.
I just have to say, this is my new favorite metric. My new favorite KPI is that production per day.
Yeah, why?
You can see and plan for the entire year how many days the practice is going to have with hygiene, and work backward to say, if this is our goal for the entire year of 2024, and this is how many days the office is open and has hygiene, then this is how much we need for that production per day. And then you can work backward from there to the other KPIs that you're going to mention here in a minute.
That's such a good point too, that we don't just throw a dart at the wall to pick what we want this goal to be. So even better yet, we pick a goal. Let's start there. So if this is going to be a lagging indicator, we don't have anything we're aiming towards, right? So we need a goal for what we want our production per day to be. And it's great to have higher level targets and outcomes that we're striving towards. We work with our teams on successful outcomes that then filter down into tangible goals that are then fed by targets. And if we know our annual target and we look at the days per week, we can, like you said, work backwards and know, okay, so our hygiene department needs to gross this much per day. And we have 3 hygienists. So each hygienist needs to gross however much. And now we have a goal. And every single day we can reflect and know whether we're reporting on it daily or weekly, but at least we know individually. I can look at my schedule and know how close I am or not to where we need to be. So I love that, Heather. Feeding into your production per day is production per hour and per visit. Now, I'm going to point out right off the jump, this says $0. So this is the hardest one to track. So production per hour it can be gross or net. And this is the dollar amount completed by the hygienist or hygienists every hour that's set up and tracked to be determined by this metric. So in Dental Intel in particular, this particular office, as you can see, they don't have their hours set up within the analytics platform. It's a little bit tedious, and not everybody takes the initiative to enter those in. And so now we can't get that data on per hour. Now you could do this manually, right? You could look at how many hours you generally work per day, how many days per week did we work. So they could track it manually, being that they don't have it built into Dental Intel. But if you do use an analytic platform like Dental Intel and you have your hours built into the program, it's going to automate this number for you. We're going to go a little bit more into production per hour with some visuals of what a schedule could look like. I just wanted you to see that if you're a coaching client on this webinar or somebody who uses Dental Intel and you go, I'm going to go figure out what my production per hour is. A lot of our teams see this if you don't have the hours set up within that platform, but it's totally trackable.
I just want to clarify that the hours, you can't just take what you were paid hour-wise, because you're going to show up before that first patient walks through the front door. You're going to attend morning huddle, those kinds of things. That type of hour is not included in this specific. These are clinical hours when a patient can be in your chair.
That's a great point. Thank you for adding that. Yeah. And when we talk about capacity in a little bit, same story. Yeah. So then we're also going to look at production per visit. And this doesn't always equate to production per hour. And you're going to see that in an example that we have in just a few minutes as well. So production per visit is the same thing. It can be measured in gross or net, and it's the dollar amount that's completed per visit in the selected time period by the hygienist or hygienist. And so, for example, on this, you can see in the upper right-hand corner, during that week's time, there were 202 visits. And so they take the production that was generated and then divide it by the 202 visits, and you get $184.08 per visit on average. Now, if you look at that, you can see that each hygienist had a different production per visit amount, 230, 191, 190, but it averages out in Dental Intel amongst the entire department. You do have the ability in your practice management software, manual reporting, or any analytic platform to choose individual providers or departments or how you want to look at this. You can look at production per visit as an office as a whole as well. It can get a little bit trickier restoratively because there are a lot of little small appointments that end up in the doctor's schedule, post-op visits and emergencies and things like that can skew the PPV. So for hygiene, it's a little bit more representative of what we're doing. And like I said, I have a couple of examples built in for you to see. So when we're looking at this section here before we conclude on this, and then we'll jump back to countermeasures in a little bit, our overall production at the end of the month, retrospectively looking backward, we can be looking every single day at what is my production per day? What was my production per hour? What was my production per visit? And then the very next day, look at that again and make modifications as needed. At the very next day, we can make modifications. We can impact those numbers throughout the month to then make sure that when we go and look retrospectively, we've done everything we can do to make sure that we're maximizing that. Anything else from you, Kirk, on that before we move on?
Not so much. And while this might seem overwhelming, just little baby steps, little, you don't, it starts with just understanding a few things and then putting another layer on it, another layer on it. So you don't have to capture all of it at one time.
Love that. Yes. Got to start somewhere.
Right.
Start small. All right. Another lagging indicator is hygiene capacity. So when you're looking at your schedule, how many holes are in the schedule, basically? How much of that time that you're available do you have patients in the chair? That's what we're wanting to know. What's the utilization percentage of the available time that we have in the schedule? And so that's what hygiene capacity measures, right? Of the time that the hygienist or hygienists were available to see patients during a given period of time, how much of that was spent seeing patients? So we have a capacity tracker at ACT, and this is something that our coaching clients use on a regular basis. Each hygienist will track their capacity. And basically what you do is you say, okay, on the first, I have an example filled out for, I had 8 hours available. I was here for 8 hours that I could have been seeing patients during. And on that day, the first, I had 8 hours with patients. Nobody canceled. My schedule was full. It was great. Same thing on Tuesday, the second. I had 8 hours available and 8 hours were with patients. Well, on Wednesday, the third, I had someone who canceled. And so they weren't able to recover that time, the admin team. I wasn't available to make calls. And so I ended up still having that 1 hour where I didn't have patients in my chair. And so I had 8 hours available, but I had 7 hours with patients. And then on Thursday, it's a 7-hour day. I only had 7 hours available and I had 5 hours with patients. And so when we look at that, we can then tally that at the end of the week and say, okay, I had 28 hours with patients of 31 available hours. So I was at 90.3% utilization or capacity of my schedule. Does that make sense? Some of the things that people ask us is, so maybe on Thursday when I only had 7 hours, maybe I had asked to leave an hour early because my kiddo had a school production that I wanted to attend. And so I had approved to leave, and therefore I only had 7 hours available that day and not 8. And then sometimes people will say, well, what if someone canceled at the end of the day and you let your hygienist go home, or you offered and they said, I'd love to go home. Thank you. That actually is still 8 hours because we could have seen a patient during that time and we just didn't because the cancellation happened. We didn't recover it. And that person asked if they could go home. So for the most part, that's the only question that we get. This is super simple. Otherwise, how many hours were you available? And of those hours, how many were seeing patients? We really like to see this number at about 95% or above, so that we know that we're maximizing the potential of our schedule as much as possible.
Yeah. Can I just add, the capacity tracker, if you've been on anything we've done before, you know that it's a tool that we really, really hold very high. And no matter how great your practice is, you might be starting, you might be in the middle, or you might be an elite mastery level practice. It doesn't matter. I think every practice on the planet should have capacity trackers for their providers because it creates so much individual accountability and information and understanding. And I'll say this, if somebody doesn't want to track their hours, I would just ask why not? Because you're going to find that your favorite team members are going to want to know, how am I doing? This is super clear. It's super transparent. It's also going to make it, you're going to be resistant to do silly things like, let me just expand. All of the information you need to be healthy for the most part, as far as in regards to the schedule, you're going to see clearly in this tracker. And you're going to see people proud of it if they start at 78%. So let's say you're a hygienist, you start at 78%. Great, celebrate that. We're going to go to 80, then we're going to go to 82, then we're going to go to 85, and you're going to see the practice will transform.
Kirk, you just said the word expand, which triggered a thought for me too. And this is because, again, working with teams, we hear things like this a lot. I'm scheduling out to November. We need another hygienist. We need something. Like, I'm scheduling my 6-month recares out to November, out to December. And the doctor's like, oh my gosh, we have to get another hygienist. Well, before we do that, let's look at our capacity, because perhaps we're at 78%. And we are having cancellations or holes in our schedule that otherwise, if they were maximized, maybe we wouldn't be out quite as far as we are. So this is a great step before taking a big jump in hiring someone new or adding another operatory or building out, to make sure that we're maximizing the time that we currently have and the providers that we currently have before we go and make that. So again, that goes to data to help with that strategic decision making versus our feelings. And when we talk about how this benefits the hygienist, if you're a hygienist who gets hired because an office is expanding, they're busting at the seams, they're scheduling 9 months out, and then you get on board and your schedule's half falling apart, and then they let you go 3 months later. And wouldn't it have been nice to know that we actually couldn't support another hygienist? We had all these holes in our schedule. That was really the problem. So again, not feelings, but data to help drive that strategic decision making. And this is just another key, easy way to track this information on a consistent daily basis, weekly basis, reporting back to your team.
Yeah, and I can't. Oh, go ahead, Heather. You go first.
Okay. Like you said, Miranda, this brings it from the subjective to objective so that we can make that informed decision. And I want to bring it back to the patient. Are we taking care of the patients that we love so much? We say, yes, I am. I surely am. Well, are you, if you are at a low capacity rate and you have all these holes in your schedule, but you are booking out till November, then gosh, are we really taking care of these people? So this is a really great way for us to recognize that we are or we aren't.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Sorry, Kirk, go ahead.
No, I was going to just piggyback on pretty much what you just said. Are you taking good care of the patients? And then data just removes all emotion. So one thing that we've learned, you might be listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, all they talk about is data. Well, the data is an important piece because it's very emotionless. I mean, there's no emotion to it. I know how I'm doing. I know if it's benefiting the practice or if it's benefiting the patient. Now, when it comes to emotional conversations, I'm having great ones during the day. Barrett and I were just talking about this, like the data grounded at the beginning of our meetings just calms all the crazy stuff I used to have in my head about because if you don't have data, you're telling yourself a story. And you as a dentist, if you're watching this, you're telling yourself a story about what's going on in every operatory and you're getting no, it's all on the wall right back there. It's all clear and we can work together. I love it.
Sweet. So we'll go through a couple of these other leading indicators, and we're going to get around to the countermeasures so we can see exactly what we need to impact these on a regular basis. So when we see that data on the wall, we know what to do with it. So if the lagging indicator is capacity, then the leading indicators, or a couple of them that can feed into that, are hygiene reappointment percentage and cancellation or recapture rate. So hygiene reappointment percentage is when we're measuring the percentage of hygiene visits that on the same day that they were there for a hygiene visit, they scheduled a subsequent hygiene visit before leaving the dental office. So that patient's remaining tethered to the practice, they're bought in, they have value, and they're reappointing for that next hygiene visit before they leave. And the higher that number is, the less we have to go back later and try to fill the schedule or call those recare calls and put out the manpower to try to fill that time. And on the other side of that, speaking of filling time, is tracking our cancellations and recapture rates. So having a good system for when patients do fall off the schedule, when they're, this is measuring of the patients that are scheduled during a time period, how many canceled or no-showed. So within a short window of time, canceled or no-showed. And then of that, how many still remain unscheduled? Because this number is going to be a reflection of what's happening. I was just talking to a practice who had about 80% capacity on the doctor's schedule. I'm like, that's weird because your diagnostic number is really high and your patient acceptance number is really high. So I would imagine that you're able to fill your schedule really well. Yes, but we get a lot of cancellations. Great. So we need to start tracking that, and we need to find out why they're happening. What can we do to improve it? And what are we going to do to make sure that we do reappoint those patients and that they don't end up kind of falling through the holes in the bottom of the bucket, right? So that's going to come into play with our countermeasures. So one more lagging indicator that we'll push through here is Perio visit percentage. And this one is very unique to hygiene. And so this is measuring, it's dividing the total number of patients that were seen for Perio into the total number of hygiene visits in that period. And when I say Perio, that's taking into consideration codes like 4341, 4342, 4346, maintenance 4910, debridements, and 6081, the peri-implantitis code. So of the number of hygiene visits you had, you can see in the upper right-hand corner, this particular example, there was 178 hygiene visits in the given time period. 80 of those had one of these codes attached to them versus a traditional preventative or prophy visit. And so you'll see there that this particular practice with those numbers is at a 45% Perio visit percentage. And 30 to 40% is a solid benchmark for practices that measures pretty paralleled along what the general population and what we know through studies around what they have in terms of gum disease. Some of the leading indicators that will filter into that lagging indicator of Perio visit are Perio presented and Perio acceptance. So what we're looking at when we're trying to see, if our Perio visit percentage is low, it's 9%. We know the general population of 30 and above is somewhere around the 45% mark in terms of having some level of gum disease. We're going to be like, we probably should be presenting more Perio. There's probably more Perio in our practice than we recognize. And so this number helps us to look at the number of patients that we're seeing of that, what number were presented with a periodontal treatment. So if you look at this practice saw 109 patients and 4 of them were presented with Perio. I do believe in dental intel, if you're using this platform specifically, it's people who haven't been treatment planned or had Perio in the past. And so it would be new diagnosis of Perio. All right, and then Perio presented also reflects in dental intel of people that are 30 years old and older. So just again, for anyone who's a client who's watching or uses this platform, just know that you might be like, our number was higher than that because I presented 6 people. Well, if 2 of them were under 30 years old, they might not have gone into your dental intel calculation. So just a little caveat of this particular software. And then Perio acceptance is looking at what percentage of the patients that we're seeing in the practice that are over 30 years old, if you're looking at dental intel, that are not currently in a Perio status already, were diagnosed with Perio treatment and said yes to all or a portion of the treatment. So to simplify that, we're looking at how many patients we saw, and of that, how many were diagnosed with one of those therapeutic periodontal codes, 4355, 6081, 4341, 4342. And of that, how many accepted? So you'll see in this example, they had 100% acceptance that week. 4 people were presented with periodontal therapy treatment plans, and 4 people accepted at least a portion of and got started scheduling same day that treatment. Okay, so what are we going to do if these numbers are off track? So when we're looking at this particular case right here, we're looking at net adjusted production. This practice is very similar in size to the first practice that we saw that was at 37,000. And you can see their net adjusted is at 11,596. So they're going, man, this is off track. This isn't really where I want this to be. And so what do? We look at their production per day. If you remember that original example of gross production per day, it was at a little over $7,000 per day. This practice is sitting at just under $3,000 per day. So we're never going to hit that production goal if we don't fix the production per day, the production per hour, production per visit. This particular office right now is at $85.34 per visit. So again, when we're looking at how can we impact our visit, our hour, our day, so that we can overall impact that larger lagging indicator of production, what kind of countermeasures can we put in place? So one of the countermeasures is evaluating your service offerings. Heather, do you want to talk a little bit about like profies all day long versus like a unique service mix?
Absolutely. And this is where some of that burnout can come into play too. If we're doing the exact same thing over and over and over, we know and understand that each patient is unique and they are going to present with different needs. Not every patient is the exact same. So what makes up our different service mix, as you can see listed, profies, para-maintenance, radiographs. What kind of radiographs? Are we taking radiographs that the patient needs, or that is just, oh, we do 4 bite wings all the time? Fluoride, I'm a huge proponent for fluoride varnish, SDF as well. I work in one practice 1 or 2 days a year, and he's taught me how to do SDF. I love it. It's amazing. Again, is every patient going to need it? No, but that's why it's a mix of services. The sealants, laser, and other adjuncts, different products that you can add to your office that are going to benefit the patient. That myofunctional therapy is taken off, and I know I have some colleagues that do a great job with that, and that nutritional counseling as well. In some of my other practices, we've done like xerostomia counseling also. Like there's so many different things that you can add in addition to your periodic 4 bite wings and prophy.
I'll say, whenever I jump on board and I get a new client and I see something like a production per visit is at $100 or less, I know what's on their schedule. It's 1110s, maybe 4 bite wings, right? It's 110s and 4 bite wings. It's not fluoride. It's not FMXs. It's not sealants. We're not building in laser or gingival irrigation. Like we just know the service mix is likely preventative based. Their perio visit numbers are probably going to be a little bit lower as well. And so all of these numbers start to tell a story together as they change and grow. And so here's another great thing. When you're not just doing the same thing hour after hour, that helps you as a hygienist to feel a little bit more fulfilled and prevent, like you mentioned, that burnout status.
Yeah.
And countermeasure. Oh, sorry, Kirk, go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say, this is a great conversation you can have with your hygiene team. You know, I used to think everybody loved doing 4 quads of Perio, and some hygienists like, who are you? You know what I mean? And it also has to fit the vision of the practice. So what a wonderful way just to get on the same page, because again, you're implying something, you're thinking something, but we've never really landed the plane to work on this. You'll be amazed if you just take that particular slide and just say, hey, can we talk about this? Because a lot of it's going to go back to your vision, your restorative vision, your vision about what you believe disease is and all that kind of stuff. And we did get a great question from Lucy. Can I just add that? So Lucy asked, in an ideal situation, example, full schedule, good mix of services, what's a benchmark for an 8-hour production PPD for a DH? Any ideas?
So I'm going to say it's unique and individualized to the practice to a degree based on what you're trying to accomplish and where your goals are. And I can't see the question. I can tell you have it you've posted. It's not showing up on my screen. Can you say it one more time? Or if Heather caught it? So
in an ideal situation, full schedule, good mix of services, what is a benchmark for an 8-hour production? So PPD.
I think one of your slides upcoming, Miranda, is going to show a good example.
Yeah, so it is. It's a great question, Lucy. Hang in there and we'll answer it when I pull up these slides, because this is the other piece that fits into that, which is block scheduling. And so if we're evaluating our schedule as a countermeasure and all we have available is 60 or 45-minute prophy appointments for all of our patients, then we're not going to have the ability to really implement a lot of strong service mix. So here's the great thing about ideal day or block scheduling. You get to build the day to the production that you want. And so like Heather mentioned earlier, if we have an annual target that we're working backwards from based on the number of days that we have a hygiene available, and then we know this is approximately what we need per day per hygienist to meet that goal, we can build blocks in our hygiene schedule to then suit hitting that goal on a regular basis. Again, I made mention 8 prophy days just often won't suffice. So we want to look at building in blocks for service mix. Some examples of those blocks might be having periodontal therapy or gingivitis therapy blocks. Not only does that help with production, but your patients can be seen in a very short period of time versus waiting till November when your schedule opens up for that very important appointment that you just built value around. You could have them in within the next 2 to 4 weeks. An initial perio maintenance, having blocks that are reserved just so that that person that you see in 2 weeks for perio can be back in 3 months for their first hygiene maintenance visit. Sealant blocks that can also be interchangeable with pedos. Maybe you do have nutritional or myo specialty in your office, building in blocks for that. And if you see new patients, having new patient blocks in your hygiene schedule. If you don't see the new patients, then you might need some initial to hygiene blocks in the schedule so that when the doctor does the examination, there's somewhere for that patient to go for their first hygiene visit. So a lot of different ideas around how you can build your practice's ideal day. And this is what Heather was just mentioning a minute ago. So Lucy, this will start to answer your question. This column on the left of $125, $125, $125, like more than likely, this is a Prophy 4 Bite Wings, Prophy 4 Bite Wings, Prophy 4 Bite Wings appointment. And so this is reaching 875 production per day. It's going to equate to 125 production per visit, 125 production per hour. So when we look at this over the course of a week, we're at about $3,500. Over the course of a month, about $14,000. Now, if you look at a schedule like the column on the right, where we build in a little bit of a service mix, we have a prophy visit, we have a periodontal maintenance visit, we have a perio visit. Maybe we're doing a half mouth there, so 2 $300 quads. Another perio maintenance visit. Now we're back to a prophy right after lunch. And then we finish our day with a perio visit. Automatically, we're jumping by almost $1,000 in daily production. Per visit, we're up to 303. And this is where you can see that per visit and per hour don't always match because we're seeing some of these patients for 90 minutes. So we're at 303 per visit, we're at about 260 per hour. And so in this example, you're going to, what is that about? I'm not good at math, almost $15,000 more, at $15,000 more-ish a month in hygiene production just by building in these blocks for our service mix. Now, you might say, we don't have perio in our practice like that, or we don't have protocols established right now that I would need 2 blocks of perio per day. Great. Let's just look at if we added fluoride. If we really started a caries assessment process in our chair, and we started to say, every patient in my chair that we all align on low, moderate, and high risk level, this is what we all agree as hygienists equals low, moderate, and high caries risk. And everyone that's moderate or high, we're going to start recommending a fluoride varnish for. And we're going to start sharing with patients the value in that. And so instead of the 125 every visit, we had 1, 2, 3, 4 of these patients at a moderate to high risk who also got a $50 fluoride treatment. And now we're at 175 for those 4 visits. That automatically takes us up to $17,002 for the month over the 14. So we improved by $3,200 simply by helping 4 additional patients a day have a reduced risk of caries and sensitivity. So that's where I like to blend that mindset of the practice benefits. You benefit in the patient benefits when we start looking at these numbers and recognizing that maybe there is more that we can be contributing to the practice and to our patients' oral health service mix. Hopefully that helps, Lucy. Now, it's very unique to the practice when it comes to what do we want the ideal day to be. And it's going to depend on, again, that net versus gross, how contracted are you with plans versus not. But we definitely, if you're under $100 per visit, like I would say that's well below what we would want or expect. And if you're looking at fee-for-service practice, it's going to be very different than a PPO practice. And it's going to be based on your practice's goals, philosophy of care, right? You're not going to be able to go from $1,000 a day to $2,000 a day if you don't implement a lot of systems or protocols around perio and things like that. Anything else on this?
Well, I was just going to say, just by asking the right questions, you're going to come to some incredible answers. You don't always have to know everything. So when you're below $100, I mean, that's what we do as coaches. Like, why? Like, let me start asking why. Like, what's going on back here? So we encourage people to be curious individually and as a team, and you could start to problem solve in such a better way. So it's great.
Yeah. All right, well, let's look at countermeasures for capacity. I'm pushing on time. I'm not good at that. I always want to share more information than we have time for. So if we're looking at if I'm off track with capacity, I'm at 84% capacity. I'm not in the 90s like I really want to be, in those high 90s. So we're looking at hygiene reappointment percentage, and we're looking at cancellations and tracking that data. So countermeasure number one, we want to build value in their very important hygiene appointment. So it starts with valuing what you do, so that then you can create and transfer that value to the patient in their upcoming appointments. We want to just ask the patient to reserve their next visit now. How can we help you now? Have a reservation in our schedule to make sure we're helping to maintain your level of care. And so we want to consider that time when we reserve it confirmed. One of the things I hear sometimes when I'm in observing in practices is, well, let's just go ahead and pick a time. And then if it gets closer and you realize it doesn't work for you, just let us know. So we're basically inviting cancellations into the practice when we word it that way. So we really want to make sure that when we are reserving that time for the next appointment, number one, we try with every single patient to reserve their next appointment. And secondly, how are we using our language to build value in that being a confirmed appointment from that moment forward? And then we're working with our administrative team to issue reminders. We're not calling to verify that that time still works for them. We're just reminding them that we're looking forward to seeing them at that upcoming time. And so that builds us into countermeasure number two, which is designing and documenting a system for reducing cancellations. By the way, we have some of these resources we're going to help share with you all so that you can have access to this as well. One of them is our document on systems for reducing cancellations. Having a consistent reminder system, not verification or confirmation system, because it was considered verified when we scheduled, but a reminder system, starting coding our patient behaviors and making sure that we know those patients that are those repeat offenders of no showing. And then maybe we start having them be same day schedule instead of reserving their appointment ahead of time. We want to have a cancellation fee, but not use it. Right? We want to have the threat of that, but know that it really doesn't work. Kirk and I just had a really long conversation about this recently. And so people ask all the time, should that be a part of our system? You'll see in our system for reducing cancellations, we talk a lot around, should we have that fee and what should we do with it? And then we want to align with the team on how we accept and respond to cancellations. Are we just saying like, okay, sounds good. Let me know when you want to come back in. Or are we creating a more personalized approach and really doing everything we can to recover that time in the moment? All right, pushing right along to the last KPI and countermeasure. So Perio visit percentage. What do we do when this is off track? So in this particular example, they're at 3%. Again, the general population, 30 years old and over, are somewhere in the 45, high 40 range in terms of percent of people with gum disease. This isn't representative of the general population at 3%. And so of 290 hygiene visits, they had 8 visits that incorporated some type of periodontal code. They saw 56 patients and didn't present any of those 56 patients with anything, gingivitis therapy, periodontal therapy of any kind. So all their patients are healthy, right? And then the acceptance rate. So for this particular practice, they're at 58%. They had 12 that they presented, great, but 7 accepted. So what do we need to do if our acceptance rate isn't quite where we want it to be? So if we're looking at countermeasure number one, we want to design and document a periodontal protocol. Heather and I were just talking before this about we have to align as a team on what healthy means. Do you want to talk about that, Heather?
Yes. And as a hygienist myself, I want to ask the hygienist on here, when was the last time you read the coding description for a 1110? And as soon as you read that, you recognize and realize that you are giving champagne and charging for water when you're doing a whole bunch of bloody profies. And I'm guilty of it too.
So it's funny because we were talking about that. I love that phrase and Kirk shared that with me one time. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what's happening. And we are breaking our bodies. Hygiene is hard on our bodies. That's how I ended up leaving clinical hygiene, was my body couldn't quite hang anymore. And so if we're performing services in a shorter amount of time than is appropriate, and we're on crunch mode, and we're going above and beyond performing really perio in these preventative appointments, we're going to catch you up. We're going to catch you up. We'll see you again. We'll try to catch you up. If we can all align on what healthy looks like, read the code 1110. What are we doing during that appointment truly? go back to the evidence base of what health looks like periodontally. And we all agree as a hygiene team, or if I'm an individual practitioner, I agree with myself and align and recheck myself on what is healthy. And then that's the easiest bar to measure against. Anything else in my chair that doesn't look like that is something else. And so then we need to design a treatment planning protocol for what we do in this practice when the patient isn't healthy. And then we calibrate on that treatment planning. We can use case studies. We can pull up x-rays and Perio charts, and we can say, I would treatment plan it like this. How would you treatment plan it? And we have really productive conflict conversations, which Heather and I love productive conflict conversations around how and why we're making the decisions we're making when we're treatment planning. And CE is really important. So working together as a team on CE, continuing education, that can really help to support where you and your practice want to go. If our Perio percentage is at 3% and we know that there's probably something different we should be doing, but we don't know exactly where, we haven't been to anything in a while. I'm still using the 1 through 5 AAP classifications. I'm not even at staging and grading yet. We just need to align on, like, let's make some plans this year for what we're going to do in terms of continuing education so we can improve and make a new path. Yes, Kirk.
Well, it's like we're all sharing the same brain, except both of yours are better developed than mine. The CE is so important because as you get into this, you start to value what you do more. You realize, like, I don't like it when people say, oh, well, I just clean teeth. I'm like, no, no. What you do, just by evidence of watching this webinar, you already care that much more. And when you take more CE, you develop more value. And I always say this, like, when you undervalue what you do, people undervalue who you are. If you're just saying to yourself, I'm just a hygienist or we're just a dental practice, we don't want you to think like that. We want you to think better. What you do is crazy important, and it will reflect in the amount of education, how you engage in it, and how you use it every day when you talk to your patients.
Yes. And it also, I want to circle back to something you said before, Miranda, about minimizing wait times. We are not going to minimize wait times if we are doing and performing true, like SRP or a 4346, when like we have the time frame for a 1110. We simply cannot do that. And we're trying to do our patients a favor when actually we're not. We're doing them a disservice.
That's so true. And whenever hygienists say, like, I just don't have enough time, we talk about the hour-long appointment and the 20-minute segment in the middle that is for therapeutic services. And if it's taking more than 20 minutes to provide your therapeutic services, your cleaning, right, the scaling, polishing portion of your appointment, it's probably not a preventative appointment. It's probably not. And so we need to go back and revisit health, because this goes back to, how does data help benefit me, the practitioner, me, the hygienist? What's in it for me? If you're exhausted at the end of every day and you feel like you're running behind every single day, you're probably seeing patients that are periodontal or gingivitis patients as maintenance, preventative maintenance patients. You probably are. Like, and again, like Heather said, I've done it myself. Like, been there myself. I worked in a practice that started at 4% Perio percentage, and I worked with a really great coach who helped us. And by the time I left that practice, we were at like 23%. So you can do this. I was a solo practitioner. I didn't need a whole department. I just had to shift my mindset a little bit and change a few of the habits that I had gotten into as a hygienist. And I had to get really comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. They weren't conversations that I was used to having with patients, because I had gotten into that same mindset, like you said, Heather, of wanting to feel like I was like, but we're friends and I want to be nice and I don't want to give them bad news. And it was like, wait a minute, if I'm denying them the opportunity to be healthy and I'm just trying to be nice, I'm actually creating a much worse scenario for them 10 years from now, when we never got this under control and it slowly has progressed for a decade, right? And now they move and they go find a new hygienist in Utah and she's diagnosing periodontal disease in a way that I wasn't. And now they think back at me and think, I can't believe I trusted her for 10 years. Right. And so we think we're being nice. And I always say being nice isn't always being nice. It's easier, but we have tools like the say this, not that tool that help you to define language, to calibrate around how we have conversations like this with our patients. So you mentioned words like just and little and kinda. There's a little bit of bleeding over here. I kind of think this. when we say non-surgical periodontal therapy, that's very different value building language than a deep cleaning when we're talking with patients. And we have to, again, value it ourselves to be able to pass that value along, but the words that we use matter so much. So it's really great to align as a team around, instead of saying this, we can start saying this. Every time you hear yourself say it's just a little bit of this, it's disease. It's not a little bit of disease, it's disease. It's infection, right? And we just have to tell the patients, because they're coming to us as experts. They don't want to be unhealthy, and we're allowing for them to be if we're not just challenging that ourselves, really not challenging them. We're challenging ourselves to just talk a little bit differently or think a little bit differently.
Well, we can take the data to the patients too. Patients are going to understand numbers more than they are going to understand. You have just a little bleeding, air quotes for those that are listening. If you have just a little bleed, well, how much? I don't know. I want to know where it is. How many bleeding points do I have? You know, a 6-point Perio chart is essential, because then you can have and change your language with that patient over the appointments that you have with them. So you had 60 bleeding points at your first appointment. Second appointment, you had 40. Third appointment, you had 30. And they'll go start talking to their family about it too. Like, hey, I decreased my numbers. That is what we want to share and educate our patients with around data as well.
I love that you just brought that. One of my favorite things that I used to do as a hygienist was, at the time we used Dentrix. And so, you have, well, they all do. You have the little red dots and the red numbers when they're not good. And then we'd finish therapy and we'd reevaluate, and all that, it goes way, way, way down almost, and sometimes goes away. And I turn the patient around to look at the computer with me, and we would scroll back and forth, like last one, this one, last one, this one. I'm like, all the red, no red. I would do this with the patient, right? All the red, no red, high fives. Like, you can really, like, because some might not give a poo about a 5, 6, or 7, but they can see that it's still data. They can see that visual data and that change, and they'll remember that the next time they want to skip an appointment, or they run out of interproximal brushes and they know, like, oh, that red is going to come back. I got to get back on it. So you're exactly right. We can use data in a lot of different ways with our patients, in the same way that we're using it in our practice to help form change. So I love that. All right. Final takeaways. Just 10 minutes too late. It's fine.
Love it.
Dental hygiene is a business within a business, you guys, and you run that business. Your operatory is a business within the business. So using data to help guide and develop your operatory, your day, your department, what's happening in the hygiene world within the practice, has positive implications on the patients and the practice, and ultimately for you as well. So data is not personal. It takes all the personal out of it, actually. And it helps us to look at how can we use metrics to help guide efficiencies and start making change in the practice that's going to benefit the oral health of our patients, and going to help us, again, leave at the end of the day feeling like we have a little something left for everybody at home that we love so much, and making sure that the practice is profitable. So those 112 patients that people that rely on the health of the practice, all of our employees and their dependents and kids. And we always count puppies and dogs in that mix too, by the way. Dogs and cats count. We want to make sure we're doing everything we can to help the practice be as profitable as possible. Heather, what about you for final takeaways? Anything that you want to share to inspire the hygienists and doctors on the call today?
Gosh, if there's one thing that I would say, it's that data takes the subjective to objective. If you are ever saying, I think, or I feel, that just tells you need more data.
Love it. Kirk.
I love this piece so much. I don't think you can stop learning on it. And I think there's so many great questions. We still have a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
I want to share. But I would just encourage you. I mean, Lucy, you mentioned it earlier about alignment and why this is so important. It's crazy important. And if anything, you're learning individually, bring this to a team meeting. We hear complaints all the time, our team meetings aren't that good. Well, use this as the spine of a great meeting to get us all aligned, and you'll start asking really, really good questions. So I just love it. Thank you guys for an amazing informative hour or plus program. So it's great. Now, Lucy also asked the question, I'm in Canada, or comment, very different up here, but this information is super info is very translatable as well. So thank you for that. And then Michelle asked the question, any suggestions for a pediatric fee-for-service office? Anything you would add?
Ooh, can I take this one?
I was like, Heather, that's right up your wheelhouse.
Love peds, special place.
I stay away from peds. I bow down to you. Okay, go.
So I would lean very heavily on those adjunctive services that we talked about before. I work with some clients that are peds, and the myofunctional therapy has been such a really great place for these pedo practices to bring in something else. Bring in a myofunctional therapist that you hire on like 1 day a week or multiple days a week. Bring in your new patients at that time so that they can do a myo assessment at the same time as their new patient appointment. SDF, it's blown up. It's amazing. Again, use the Say This, Not That document to really align as a team on how you educate the parents on what that looks like and what that will mean for their children. Those are my two main things for peds.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. And then Hussam asked the question, for patients that did not reserve their next appointment, what's good verbiage when texting them to make an appointment for their next recall, checkup, and cleaning appointment? Who wants this one?
Well, I'll say what I wouldn't put in the text, and then maybe Heather, you can say what you would put in the text. So we'll do a Say This, Not That live. Don't say you're due for your next cleaning, right? It should be something customized. When we say you're due for, it's like the calendar flipped, you showed up on my reminder alert, and I'm giving you a call. We want to do a little something more personable. I even like building in, like, your last visit was February of 2023, something like that. So Heather, my don't do is just say you're due for, really for anything in general.
Yeah.
But Heather, go for it. What would you say?
Well, at ACT, we talk a lot about a reason for return, and I would wrap that into a personalized message for your reason for returning, right? Mrs. Jones, last time, and you can personalize it to come from the provider as well. Mrs. Jones, last time you were in, we were talking about your daughter's wedding. I know it's really important to you to maintain your health. Let's get you scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
And can I just add
and
one layer?
If you're doing something in a blast, you might have to say something around I try to avoid things like routine or regular. We want it to say like your customized program of care. Please give us a call so that we can help you reestablish your customized program of care with your hygienist or something of that nature, instead of routine or due for.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing I would say is, this is a great question. There's always a layer that's beneath it a little bit. And I think the important thing, Hussam, is that everybody is using text features in every business now almost. And I think when people miss an appointment, I would want to get them on the phone and just create a little bit of engagement. I don't think you're going to have a lot of luck coming up with the perfect text to send to somebody that goes, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said exactly that, because I was thinking the same thing. You want to make sure that we can create some engagement. Now, if they've canceled a lot or missed a lot of appointments, I'm not just going to completely stalk them, but just a short little conversation, get expectations right. That if we put you in the schedule, I want to make sure you're coming, and the reasons why and all that kind of stuff. So anything that creates a little bit of curiosity or a little concern. We're so concerned. When you missed your appointment, are you okay? For somebody that doesn't do it a lot. And then maybe for somebody that has a lot of disease or something like that. Again, back to the personalization is like, we're just concerned. Can you reach out to us? I was talking to the doctor this morning. I have a few questions. You don't have to reveal anything specific, but you can say, listen, we're concerned. Last time you were here, you had all the bleeding on the lower left and the lower right. We want to make sure that you're taken care of, and we want to have you back and make sure. So I don't know. I would just
to use the hygienist name too. Like,
yes,
if they see a consistent hygienist over and over, like Michelle asked that I reach out to you. She was concerned she hasn't seen you in a while. So I read this like as if we're imploring like a hygiene recare system. So you want a good mix. What you just said, Kirk, like, we don't only want to reach out to our hygiene recare list, people who haven't, they're a month past, they're 3 months past, their tip customized program of care interval. We don't want to just text blanket, big automated text, never touch base again. I think you need to have a follow-up system that's like a text that you can integrate a templated language that sounds personal. If you don't hear back, we need a follow-up with probably a phone call. You can build in an email. You can do it in every capacity and customize that as much as possible. But if you're able to build in information about that patient, or again, I think it's great, Dr. So-and-so asked, or your hygienist specifically asked for me to reach out to you because it's been since February of last year that we saw you for a visit. And we're very concerned. It's our responsibility to help you maintain your health, that type of thing. It's a bigger value build than the blanketed, like you're due for it. And they probably think it came from AI anyway.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah. I love that personal touch because then they're like, oh, they were thinking about me?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Love it.
Totally. And then just a couple others, Jen Mann said, data don't lie. True.
Data don't lie.
And a lot of these, can you please send the link for the replay? Yes. A lot of those. So yes. So great stuff.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
We'll do that, and it's gonna live in the BPA. There's a webinar section in the BPA that these are always posted to within a reasonable amount of time after the webinar, so you can access it back there as well. I think that's it. Yeah. There's our golden ticket again. If you didn't see that at the beginning and you were a doctor and you want to join us in Milwaukee for our To the Top Study Club, you get a free pass. So give us a shout or email Gina @actdental.com if you'd like to join us for that. And the BPA link once again. Anything else? Any final thoughts? This was fun.
Yeah, so fun.
I think we could talk for hours about this.
I know. I'm like, oh, the clock.
We're geeks about this.
And I only picked 3, you guys.
I know.
Hey.
Very limited, but gosh, there's still so much we could talk about.
It's really fun because I have so much anxiety about going over, and we have so much to cover, and there's always great questions, but people always stay on till the end, like everybody, so thank you guys for staying on. Thank you for showing up. We're going to keep bringing it. Join us back in the BPA. Join us for To the Top. And if you're just really struggling and you don't like going to work, don't do that anymore. Raise your hand. We are here to help you every step of the way. So until we see you guys next time, or you hear from us next time, keep showing up and we'll keep bringing it. Hope you guys have a better practice and a better life. Thank you both, Miranda and Heather. That was excellent.
Love it. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Awesome. Bye. Have a great day, everybody.